agree?
That's fine. I think
Excellent.
we're ready.
So let's go.
All right, let's admit everybody.
Sí tenemos
Hola, hola a todos, ¿cómo estáis?
Muy bien, muchas gracias.
Hola.
Muy buenos días.
Buenos días, ¿cómo andáis
Buenos
todos?
días.
Hola, buenos días.
Buenos días.
Bien, gracias.
¿Cómo estáis? ¿Estáis con salud
Buenos
y con
días.
economía, con las dos cosas, o solo estáis con una? ¿Cómo estáis?
Ambas las dos, gracias a Dios.
Muchas gracias.
Buenos días. Con las dos también, muy bien.
Buenos días.
Buenos días.
Buenos días. Bueno, yo creo que ha sido, bueno, fue el sábado un día bastante intenso, bastante con muchas cosas que pasaron. Tuvimos hasta brindis incluso. Hoy tenemos con nosotros, y ya está por aquí, ahora dentro de muy poquito haré su presentación al conferenciante que tenemos hoy invitado, que es Peter Kurzina. Bueno, ya os hablaré en un segundo de él. Pero sí quiero hacer un poco un brevísimo repaso por lo que llevamos y por qué hoy estamos con el tema del liderazgo en la adversidad. Recordáis que empezamos con la escucha y la comunicación. Creíamos que era imprescindible desarrollar esa capacidad dentro de la compañía, dentro de nosotros mismos y hacia el mercado para empezar a entender la crisis. Pasamos luego al tema de cómo es gestionar entornos de mucha ambigüedad como el actual y con qué nuevas ordenanzas tenemos que empezar a incorporar aprendizajes y tenemos que empezar a incorporar nuevas prácticas en nuestro día a día. Y tuvimos el primer día a Porsche analizando el caso de cómo gestionar el mercado y al Corte Inglés viendo cómo lidiar con toda la cuestión del confinamiento y posterior. Y el sábado estuvimos más a fondo hablando de aprendizaje y de innovación, una vez conectado el aprendizaje del Día de la Ambigüedad, para ver exactamente cómo proponer medidas tanto al mundo entero, como vimos, como también a casos concretos de empresas en las que tenemos cerca, ¿no? Hoy terminamos la semana online con liderazgo en la adversidad. Tenemos con nosotros a Peter Kurzina. Peter Kurzina es, ahora voy a pasar al inglés muy pronto para hacerle una introducción. Peter Kurzina ha sido el profesor número 1 en MIT durante muchos años. Su curso sobre liderazgo en adversidad era el curso mejor valorado por los alumnos durante 12 años. Y él tiene, además de ese curso, tenía otro que se llamaba los CEOs, los directores generales en la encrucijada, ¿no? Entonces, bueno, era como... estoy escuchando la interpretación. Entonces, digamos que ese curso del liderazgo o sea, el CEO, el director general en la encrucijada, era y ha sido otro curso estrella que él dirigía en MIT. Bueno, él va a hacer una charla y va a hacer varios cortes para que hagamos preguntas. Como siempre, os agradecemos mucho la contribución en el chat. También os agradecemos mucho las preguntas. Cuando llegue el momento, es único tener aquí a Peter, que además de estar muy ocupado, pues en este momento con la crisis que hay, precisamente su tema es uno de los temas más candentes en el mundo, como veis, y más que nunca él tiene ahora mucha demanda y mucha gente que quiere que le cuente cómo liderar en la adversidad. Creo que es una muy buena conexión también con lo que viene a continuación durante el día, y sin más, si os parece, voy a presentar a Peter y continuamos. Hello, Peter. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Rafa. Hola, hola. Buenos días. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. And I know some of you might be in very different places. My name is Peter Kurzina. And as a word of introduction, a little background on me, I went to the University of Pennsylvania and earned a degree in economics. I then went to law school.
Peter, one second before you continue. One second. Todos sabéis que tenéis la posibilidad de interpretación o sea, que podéis escuchar a Peter en inglés y lo podéis escuchar también en español si presionáis el vínculo de interpretation, ¿ok? O sea, que ahí podéis elegir si queréis escucharlo en una lengua o en otra. One second, Peter. I'm going to make a very short introduction about you, and then you continue, please. So Peter Kurzina, he's going to make an introduction of himself as well. But I want to tell you that Peter is one of the ambassadors of Westfield, which is a true honor for the institution, for us. And also, I think having him close in every moment of the life of the company, of the Westfield, is impressive and wonderful. But particularly in moments like this, when he's such an expert in this field, in crisis and adversity, I think it's especially wonderful for us. So what I can say about Peter, well, is my friend, but above all, you know, he's a fantastic professor and at MIT, and you know, he was my professor at MIT in the course that I took with him. I think it's the best course that I took ever in a business school, and I think you know, the way he engaged, you know, students with issues that are crucial in a business life, I think it's impressive. And the way he handled that course in particular. Peter, apart from being an excellent professor, has a very long and very interesting, impressive career, you know, in business, precisely managing businesses that were in particular tough situations and making them better year after year. That is truly impressive. So, well, Peter, it's an honor to have you here, and a true pleasure that you are today in this online week, which is the first time for Westfield that we do a fully online week for the students. And it's a pleasure that you are part of this innovation experiment for the school.
Rafa, thank you very much for your kind words. And that's good that you explained to everyone about the interpretation button on the lower right. I discovered it so I could understand you when you spoke Spanish. And now I will speak Spanish to the students. Hola, hola, buenos dias. Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Peter Kurzina, and I thought I might give just a couple of quick words of introduction to you. I went to the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, where I earned a degree in economics. I then went to law school at Northwestern University in Chicago, where I earned a Juris Doctorate, and I became a member of the Illinois Bar. But I never really liked the law. I didn't want to practice the law. I loved business. And so I spent 32 years of my business career doing workouts, turnarounds, interim, and crisis management in troubled companies. And in the middle of my career, I was selected to be a Sloan Fellow. The Sloan Fellows program is at MIT's Sloan School of Management. And it is a one-year, very intensive, mid-career MBA program. After I got my degree, I went back to doing my turnaround work. And a number of years later, I was asked to come back to Sloan to give a lecture. That lecture turned into a 15-year run as a senior lecturer at the school. And recently, I retired from that position. But enough about me. I want to talk about a favorite subject of mine, leadership. If there were ever a time and a need for leadership, it is in today's world where adversity and crisis seem to be a way of life with all of us. Whether it is a major hurricane that destroys your principal distribution center, or a disgruntled employee who comes back to your office with a pistol in his or her hand, or a major pandemic which suddenly appears, which we all are faced with today, or just all of the uncertainties and unknowns facing all of us today in this crazy world in which we live. All are crises, all are adversities, and they need to be dealt with by leaders. Be they politicians, CEOs, division heads, owners of small businesses, or any other kind of leader. Now, one of the courses I taught that Rafa mentioned at Sloan was called Managing in Adversity. And as I look back on it now, perhaps a better title would have been Leading in Adversity. The reasoning behind that course is that I happen to believe one of the essential skills of any successful leader today is the ability to deal with the high adversity situation. Now, what do I mean by this term, high adversity situation? I define a high adversity situation as the triple witching hour. It's the moment of truth. It is that critical situation in which a leader of any organization needs to quickly define the issues, figure out the options, evaluate those options, and then make a decision and take critical and precipitous actions. Actions which could well determine the fate of the organization and the leader. And by the way, I think I should add that that initial decision and actions that are taken won't necessarily be the ultimate solution to the problem. Hopefully, it puts that decision puts the organization in a better position than it was initially, a better position from which it can then move to an ultimate solution to the problem. I say to you, as leaders and future leaders of your organizations, in this day and age, you will face high adversity situations. In fact, I predict that all of you will face many high adversity situations during your coming years of your career. The one thing that an organization in crisis, an organization facing adversity, the one thing such an organization needs is a leader, a real leader, not a manager. Jack Welch, the longtime CEO of General Electric, was quoted as saying a number of years ago, quote, "The world is full of managers and desperately short of leaders, real leaders," end quote. And that brings us up to a question. What is the difference between managers and leaders? In fact, that difference is substantial. What do managers do? Managers control. Managers tell their employees what to do. And managers typically focus on getting that task done that the boss has said he or she wants done. Leaders, on the other hand, leaders are very, very different. Leaders inspire. Leaders energize, leaders excite, leaders engage people. These things that a leader does result in the big difference between managers and leaders. And that big difference is that leaders have followers. Managers generally do not have followers. There's an old saying, quote, "No one's a leader if there are no followers," unquote. And you've got to remember, following is a totally voluntary act. When you tell people what to do, which is oftentimes what a manager does, that doesn't inspire people to follow that manager. You have to appeal to people to get them to follow you. You have to inspire them. You've got to convince them to want to follow you. To expand on this difference between managers and leaders, research has been done by psychologists, and that research shows that managers tend to seek comfort. Managers oftentimes are risk averse. They want to avoid conflict. They just want to focus on getting that task done that the boss has said he or she wants done. Now, that same research that showed managers as being risk averse showed leaders as being risk-seeking. Leaders are comfortable with risk. Oftentimes, they seek it out. Think of some of the great business leaders. As an example, Stephen Jobs, the late Stephen Jobs, the founder of Apple. He was very comfortable with risk. Elon Musk, the founder of Tesla, very, very comfortable with risk and dealing with it. So how does leadership relate to today's world of seemingly constant adversity and crisis that we all seem to be facing, and you will be facing in the coming years? When you are in adversity, when you're facing a crisis, all of your constituencies are going to be looking to you, the leader. Who are these constituencies? I think you know who they are. They're first your employees. They're your board of directors, your customers, your suppliers. If you're a public company, it's the Wall Street analysts following your company. In crisis, in adversity, all of these constituencies are going to be looking to you for leadership. They're going to be looking to you for guidance, for direction, for information, for counsel, for reassurance. If ever there is a need for leadership, it is in today's world where, as I said a few minutes ago, adversity and crisis are practically a way of life for all of us today. And while it is needed particularly in times of adversity and crisis, leadership is essential all of the time in every organization. And real leadership on your part, real leadership, I repeat this, on your part in your organization, for whatever you're responsible for in your organization, is what is going to make you stand out and perhaps rise to the top of your organization. So we can see that there is a big difference between managers and leaders. I'm not saying that one is necessarily better than the other. The world needs managers, the world needs leaders. It just is a fact of life that there is a big difference between them. Some people are managers, other people are leaders. And now I want to close my comments by throwing out a question for all of you. And you're not going to answer it in the next few minutes, but think about this. Which are you? Are you a leader or are you a manager? And again, I'm not saying one is better than the other. It's just very important for you as an individual to think about this, particularly as you pursue your EMBA at Westfield. Think about it and to figure out and know which one you are and which one you want to be. Thank you very much. And I just want to say a quick word. I'm sorry we can't have a group of you come to Cambridge this fall, as Rafa and I have done, and we've had some great sessions the past 2 years. But I think this is a great alternative, and I certainly hope in the future I will get to meet and work with some of you. You are all in the middle of your EMBAs. It's an exciting time. It's a time when you're going to grow and change. I know I certainly did when I was in my MBA program. I wish you all great luck, and hopefully we have some questions. Thank you, Rafa.
Pleasure, of course we do. When I look in the chat, I see some comments about what you just said, Peter. One of them is about the interns. One of our students says, it's very interesting, the concept of seeking risk in leaders, right? And Diego says, particularly, today, with the disruption that is needed, when we are looking for success in our business. He says that he sees that that is very important. Can you elaborate a bit more on why a leader should seek risks?
You know, I think how I like to put this is a leader's job, this might sound obvious, but a leader's job is to lead. If there is a problem or a challenge, it's the leader of the organization or the part of the organization to attack it, to go after it. It could be someone who is just a real manager might not want to take the chance of failing because he or she might fail. Believe me, all great leaders have failed one time or another, but they haven't hesitated to step up and take the risk, grab that opportunity, try and solve that problem, that challenge.
Regarding precisely this, Peter, we get another question from Catherine, who says, how can we balance risk and stability?
Risk and
stability.
I'm sorry, I don't understand that second word.
How can we balance having like a stable situation, like a situation that everything runs normal and smooth, you know, with a situation that is full of risk? How we can balance those two things in a company so that we keep the balance in between both aspects?
You know, ideally, in a perfect world, things are going very smoothly and everything is going good and everyone is doing his job. The crises, the high adversity situations usually hit you when you least expect them, just as the current pandemic hit us. Two of the examples I gave in my talk came from real live CEO cases that I had in my course, Managing in Adversity. This one electronics distribution company had a principal distribution center on Long Island. In a massive hurricane, the distribution center was destroyed. And that happened in a matter of an hour, 2 hours, and it had to be dealt with. And so the CEO at the time was a real leader. He took charge, he pulled together his team, in particular his distribution people and his sales people, and he communicated to customers. He took charge of the situation and tried to make things seem more normal. Over a period of time, the company was very successful, and today it is a much larger company. But when things are the calmest and things are going the best, oftentimes that's when the crisis hits. And you just have to roll with the punches and be willing to step in and present real leadership to all of these constituencies. They're all going to look to you. You're the boss, the leader, the person who's going to be leading the organization out of this crisis that's come up.
Well, in the chat, there's plenty of questions, right? So I'm going to try to organize them in a way that they all can fit together. Well, there's many. And you have so many examples of your life and also, you know, from the experiences of the CEOs in the crossroads in your course at MIT. Well, there's here many comments about, you know, around leaders and managers, right? Like leadership and management. So, for example, Juan Sebastian asks, can you be a good manager and a good leader at the same time?
Actually, and that's a great question. I'm going to say something. Matter of fact, I have something written here that I read recently. The main difference between leaders and managers is that leaders have people following them, as I discussed, while managers tend to have people who work for them. However, and I agree with this very much, a successful business owner needs to both be a strong leader and a manager. He or she needs to lead that team to get them on board, but then to really make sure that everything gets done so the vision takes place, you need to be a good manager. Now, sometimes what happens is you could take an Elon Musk. He is an inspirational leader. I strongly suspect, and I read about him all the time, he is not an effective manager, a manager of people for getting things done. But he has good people under him who do carry that out. And so there is a combination of someone who is probably 99% leader, 1% manager, but he has another way of making sure that his organization achieves success. I do believe people can be both leaders and managers. You know, oftentimes I'm asked the question, are people born leaders? I tend to feel in this life, there are three types of people. There are some people who are born leaders. They just instinctively have the knowledge and the capability and the qualities of a real leader. And then there are, on the other end of the spectrum, there are some people in this world who are not leaders, and they never will be leaders. They would not be comfortable being leaders. They would not want to be in the limelight, making tough decisions and leading. In the middle are many of us who, well, we're in the middle, but we can learn much about leadership and we can become leaders. I strongly believe that, and I have a talk, a lecture that I sometimes give about leadership and the qualities that I like to see and that I believe a leader has to have, and some of the skills that a leader can learn to make that person a better leader. I hope I haven't wandered too much, but I hope that helps a little bit.
I think so. Well, there's plenty of questions. So Kelvin, for example, he's addressing risk again, and he's asking, you know, from a statistic perspective, when you take risks, what are the chances of success and failure in a situation like this one?
Boy, that's a good question. You know, so much depends on the circumstances. In my very first job, I was hired as legal counsel, even though I didn't want to practice law. I was initially hired as legal counsel for a new startup modular housing company. And a leadership opportunity was thrown out to me about a week after I was there. The president of the company walked in and he said, "Peter, we have a $200,000 problem. We built a number of modular houses for a construction company, and we put them in, we built them and we installed them, and they haven't paid us. And I want you to get involved in this because our controller hasn't been able to collect the money." Well, the first thing I did, my legal training taught me, and I sort of swallowed hard listening to this charge of what the boss wanted done, but I swallowed hard and I got the contract out that we had with this contractor, and I read the contract. I then called the CFO of the construction company, and he said, "Well, there are some problems, you know, and our people have told you what the problems. There's some issues of the way the units were built." And of course, I then pointed out to him, because I had read the contract, that the contract clearly stated that we were to be paid upon delivery and setting the buildings on the foundation, which we had done. And I said, and furthermore, the issues that you're raising, we built the buildings according to your plans. Bottom line, within about a week, I had a check for $200,000. This was a startup company that badly needed the money. And all of a sudden, I was a hero. Well, then the next opportunity, a better opportunity for leadership came up when the president came in my office and he said, you know, Peter, you did such a good job collecting that receivable. I want you to take over the receivables. Again, our controller, he's just not collecting a lot of the other money that should be coming in. And so I had never collected a receivable in my life except for that $200,000. But I grabbed hold of it. I took the leadership of the situation and I proceeded to get a list of all of our receivables, who owed what, how old the receivables were, and I proceeded dialing for dollars. Every Monday morning, I would call up every customer who owed us money, and I would get a promise from him as to when I would push them, and I would get a promise as to when they were going to get a check in, this week or next week. I would write that down. I started collecting money left and right. Well, I took the challenge, and the president and the board of directors thought I was just wonderful because I was collecting all of this money, and that helped to build my reputation. 3 years later, the president had to be replaced because there still were a lot of issues in the company. I was very young at the time. I was only about 30 years old, but the board of directors turned to me and said, okay, Peter, you're now the president. Fix this company. And so when you see opportunities, when you see problems, sometimes when they're given to you, as these were by the then president of the company, don't hesitate. Grab them, run with them, do well with them, lead with them. It will build your reputation for the future.
Thank you, Peter. Like after this question, I will ask someone to ask you the question live because actually they are there and they can do it perfectly. But there's a question that it's coming, you know, like in different moments from different people in different ways, but around the same issue, which is, what do you think are the best skills or traits or competences a leader has or needs to have?
Boy, oh boy. I wish I could give my, and perhaps maybe later in the semester I can, but I wish I could give my talk on the art of leadership. I think, you know, one of the most important things is really what I just talked about. A leader cannot be afraid to step up and face a problem. Too many people want to turn their back on a problem or let someone else handle it. Oh, gee, that's not in my area. Maybe I don't know how to do that. I'm afraid of that. You can't be afraid. You have to jump in and you can't be afraid of the problems, the crises, the adversities. I think one of the most important things is being willing to step in. And then you've got to be a really good listener. That CEO who faces a major adversity isn't going to have all the answers. He needs to pull his or her team around him or her and talk about the problem, get some different viewpoints. And then ultimately, that CEO will make the decision. He has to make the decision, but he needs to listen and learn about what those options are and evaluate the options with these other people. In many ways, I think those are two important qualities. Facing issues, grabbing hold of issues, adversities, crises, and wanting to deal with them. And two, then digging into them and really figuring out what the issues are by listening to your people. You don't have time in a crisis to hire McKinsey, a big consulting firm, to come in and do a 6-month study and give you a 100-page report. You don't want that. In a crisis, you as the leader and your team around you have to quickly face the issue, and you as the leader have to make the ultimate decisions that will hopefully move the company to a better spot, hopefully solve the problem, ultimately solve the problem. And that brings me to, this is one of the many, the many skills that I think a good CEO needs to learn, is the ability to hire really good people. You as a leader are only as good as the people around you. And you need to learn how to hire good people. Now, people will say, well, Peter, how do you learn that? Well, I learned it by making mistakes. I made bad hires in my day. I believe, I assure you I did. And you will too, but learn from when you make a bad hire. But you surround yourself with good people, that's going to help you in the adversity and the crisis. That's an important skill to have. I might just mention another skill. I think the ability to talk to and address a group of people, whether it's 5 people or 500 people. A leader having good abilities to present a message, I happen to believe is very, very important. So those are just a couple of skills. Maybe one day we can have me give that talk to the students.
Of course, there will be plenty of occasions. This is home for you. This is your place. Peter, we have a survey for the students, and you know that it's going to pop up in the screen now, and they are going to show their stance or their their response to one question. I think maybe you can see it there as well, but it's in Spanish. So I'm going to
it is in Spanish.
You.
Yes.
So what it says is like a leader is someone who gives orders. That's one answer, conventional answer. Another one, a leader is the one who directs and put order in things somehow. A third one is a leader is someone who create the conditions for others to stand up and lead. Another option is someone who inspires and is very creative. And the last one is someone that generates admiration.
To me.
Oh, they will reply now. And
okay. I see. They are answering this poll. Okay.
Yeah, so good. When they reply, then we can discuss about what they think, right. And then you can give your comments about it as well.
Okay.
So we have about 44 answers so far. So we're waiting for them to complete the survey, and then we'll show the results.
So right now it's around 48 people already replied to the poll. Good. So yeah, I think we can close it, Ignacio.
Great.
Okay, I think, can you see the results?
Yes. And
okay, so basically most of the people, almost like 56% of the people said that a leader is that inspires and is creative. And 33%, which is not a small portion of the participants, believe that the leader is the one that creates conditions for others, to stand up and lead. So
I cannot disagree with that. I think those two are certainly the fourth one, with the 56% is number one. That job of a leader is to inspire and excite the organization. And part of that is creating conditions that allow others to lead and carry forth the organization, because the leader can't make every decision in the organization. He needs great people under him, and they need to be able to feel free to move forward and make decisions and lead in their own way. I keep thinking of Elon Musk. He creates the inspiration. He inspires his people, but he has a large number of managers, many of whom came from the automobile industry, who have really come up with the plans and then made sure they were executed. No, that's very good.
Thank you very much, Peter. Is there anyone that wants to, ask a question to Peter verbally, using the microphone and the camera so Peter can see you?
Rafa, I think that someone has already raised his hand. Robert?
Okay, great.
Yes. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, guys. I have a question about leadership and seniority, which it's basically how do you manage those two maybe factors when you have a leader that is, even if it is a person who is new in the company or a person who might be, have some time in the company, but not as much time as other people. And there could be some resistance in letting that person, leader, have some leadership in the environment, or maybe there's some resistance. This is something that I found personally once in a company where I was told that I have some very good leadership capabilities in people around my age or younger, but like it was sometimes difficult to get support or maybe influence people who were in, more time in that position. So how would you manage that? And I guess this happens at different stages.
Oh, yes. No, yeah. I agree. Is it Roberto?
Roberto, yeah.
Roberto, clearly that does happen. And it happened to me in my career, particularly when in that first company I mentioned that after being there about 3 years, the board decided to fire the president because things just weren't going well. And he was a fine fellow, but not a real leader. And they turned to me. And I was this young pup, 33 years old. And there were people who reported to me in my new position. Some were older. Some were in their late 40s, early 50s. Others were closer to me in age. Of course, whenever I went into a new situation like that, and I was thrust into, in total, probably 15 or 18 different companies over the years. Our organization was brought in to fix a troubled company. Usually that meant it was running out of money. And our firm, sometimes I would go in alone, but usually I would go in as the, whatever they wanted to call me, interim president, CEO. We didn't care about titles. And I would come in with some of our financial people. The first thing I would want to do is not to come in with a heavy hand, but I wanted to, step one, communicate with all the people. Well, that depended on the size of the company and the number of plants that it might have. One company had 5 plants and we had 700 or 800 employees. And we worked 3 shifts a day, 5 days a week. I wanted to address all of those employees. And it was a difficult situation, but I was doing it at 2 in the morning. I was doing it at 8 in the morning. I eventually addressed all of the shifts. And that was reaching down to all of the line people. As far as the people reporting to me, I would go into these companies and I would not know anything about their industry. And sometimes you would have a I would have a person say to me, well, what do you know about the men's shirt business? And I had just been appointed interim president of a shirt company. And I always found honesty was the best answer. I don't know anything about the shirt business. I do know a lot about good business practices and what makes a company healthy. Now, I hope you and all of your cohorts know a hell of a lot about the shirt business, because if I don't know anything about the shirt business and you don't know anything about the shirt business, we're in a world of hurt. Well, that would sometimes get a little chuckle, and you could begin to win people over. But I would want to talk to all of my direct reports when I came into a new position. And not talk to them, listen to them. Well, tell me about what you do. What are your problems? You know, what's going well? What's not going well? I want you to think about how I can help you in the future do your job better. I like doing that with the people reporting to me. And many people will respond to that very positively, and they begin to get on board. Occasionally, you run into someone who will not get on board. They are determined to go their own way. And I realize here in America, it sometimes is easier to terminate people than in some other countries. But sometimes, you know, you talk to someone, you counsel them, someone who's reporting to you. Sometimes you gotta kick them in the fanny, you know, a little bit. And if they still can't get on board, then sometimes you have to think about replacing them. And I've had to do that in a number of situations. Sometimes people would say to me, Peter, when you and your team went into a troubled company, did the people get behind you right away? Well, first of all, when a company is in serious trouble, like running out of money and coming close to closing, and that's oftentimes when we were called in, people would welcome us coming in because they realized, gee, these are men and women who specialize in turning companies around that are running out of money. And I'd say the majority, 50, 60% would be that way. Why would they be that way? Because they had a mortgage to pay. They had a child in college. They had a payment on their car. They wanted to keep their jobs. They wanted the company to be successful. Then there would be a group, a smaller group above the 50, 55, 60%. And I don't know, maybe it was 20 or 30%. These people needed a little convincing. And you worked with them, you listened to them, and maybe you helped them solve a problem or two. You begin to win them over. The thing you have to keep in mind in a crisis situation like that, we didn't have a lot of time to win people over. Sometimes you could do it fairly quickly, but then there would be that small percentage. It might be 10% of the people. They didn't think you were any good. They were only thinking of themselves, and they couldn't be convinced. They couldn't get on board. They wouldn't take direction ultimately. And people like that, those were the people I would have to reluctantly get rid of, because they will never be convinced. And in a crisis, in a adverse situation, one person has to make the ultimate decision, and that's the leader, the CEO, the president, whatever the title is. And once that decision is made, everybody's got to get on board and make sure it gets executed. Now, another quality of a leader that I know I have in my talk is the ability to not be afraid to shift gears. Sometimes you make a decision and it's not 100% correct. You've got to modify it. Or maybe you've got to reverse direction and go in another direction. A leader can't be afraid to say, I was wrong. This isn't working. Look at it. here, we're not getting the results. We've talked about it. I've decided we're going to go in this new direction. You can't be afraid to make a change like that, because none of us is infallible. We all make mistakes in life, and we need to admit those. And a leader will admit those mistakes. Leaders who refuse to admit to mistakes oftentimes go down in disaster.
Thank you.
I hope that helps.
It helps a lot. Thank you.
Peter, you address an issue that is very, very, very interesting, which is authority versus or compared to authoritarianism. You know, in crisis, you need to make very tough decisions. That's the role of a leader as well, right?
Absolutely.
When you are there, I mean, you need to combine moments where you are inspiring and being creative and, you know, developing others with moments when you need to make tough decisions, because that's in the benefit of the whole company and the ecosystem in which the company is involved, right? How do you see that? I mean, how do you see the capacity of a leader to make those tough decisions and also live with it, right? Because then you need to go back home and, you know, and live with all the decisions you've been making, right? How do you see that part of the leader?
Well, that's a very good question. Repeat that again, just a little bit.
Yeah, it's the idea around, you know, when you are a leader and you need to make tough decisions.
Tough decisions. Okay, okay.
And then it's like, whether it's, you mentioned that maybe, you know, after trying to convince in the example you were mentioning when talking to Robert, you mentioned that, you know, there was a moment for convincing people, and because of the, you know, the few times you had to make some decisions, there was a moment when maybe you need to let some people go, right, in the team. So that's a tough decision. Imagine that you have, I mean, as a leader is making tough decisions all the day. He's not only innovating and creating and doing wonderful stuff, right? A leader needs to make decisions that are not, how would I say? They are not exactly popular decisions, right?
You know, as a matter of fact, this gets back to that talk I have about qualities of a real leader. And one of those qualities is just what you said, the ability to make tough decisions. Let's say you're CEO of a company and you've been there 20 years and you've risen up in the company, but your good friend who happens to be the CFO has made several colossal mistakes recently. And you feel, and your board is telling you, we need a new CFO. You've got to be able to deal with that situation and perhaps terminate someone who you've worked with for many years and you consider an ally and a friend. Those tough decisions, and oftentimes the tough decisions revolve around shutting down divisions, cutting off product lines that aren't profitable, but that everyone loves in the company, or laying off people. I will tell you a story. This involves, it was a textile company in Western Massachusetts. And this was the company that had 5 plants and 700 or 800 employees. And in this particular case, I was brought in as executive vice president, and one of our people came in as CFO and another one as controller. The old president of the company was allowed to stay, but the owners of the company, private equity firm, said, look, the numbers are not going well. We're going to bring in Peter and his people to straighten out these numbers. And the old CEO stayed. He was left in charge of sales. I think he was in charge of sales, and I was in charge of everything else, operations, finance, all of that. Well, as a courtesy, every morning, my CFO and I would go into this old-time CEO, and we would tell him what we had been doing the previous day in the company. hopefully improvements and changes we had made and all of that sort of thing. He resented us. He did not get on board at all. And but we'd listen to what he would say. We would ask his opinion on things to try and bring him in. And this, he started harping on the general manager of one of the textile mills that we had, one of the plants that we had. He started complaining about him, and over a period of a week or two. And then we came in one morning and sat with him, and he said, "You guys, you're in charge of the plants now. You got to fire that guy. He's just no good. He's doing this, he's doing that, you know." And so after the meeting, my CFO got together. He and I got together, and I said, "Gee whiz, apparently this guy is really messing up, and we're going to have to, I'm going to have to get rid of him." And without checking, without doing my homework, I made a big mistake. I went to this fellow's plant and I terminated him. Then in the coming day or two, I had employees coming to me, other managers, and some people in that particular plant coming to me, and they weren't afraid to say this, and I respect them for it. They said, "You know, Peter, I think you made a big mistake. He was a critical guy and a very good manager, and he really did a good job." I began digging into it. I hadn't done my homework, and the CFO and I listened to the old president. We should have done our homework, and we should have realized he was selling us a bill of goods. By the way, as an aside, about a month later, the old president upped and quit and just walked away from the job, and then we took over. It was a lot easier when we were running the whole thing. But I came to the conclusion I had made a mistake firing this plant manager. I called him up at his home, and I said, "I'd like to get together with you. I'd like to talk with you." We met for coffee. And I said to him, "I made a big mistake." And I explained to him why I made the decision I did. I didn't do my homework. The old president, who didn't get along with this guy, obviously, had influenced us too much. And I had made a big mistake. And I want to correct that mistake. I want you to come back to your job next Monday morning. Well, this fellow, he was a good man. And he said, "Peter, there's nothing I'd like better. I've worked at that mill. I've risen in that mill over the past 15 years, and it's my home. I'll come back." That next Monday morning, he came back to work. And of course, I announced to the company that he would be coming back the following Monday morning. This particular plant made wool felt. And that morning, what the employees did, a number of the employees, was they took a roll of red felt. They rolled it down the steps to the office and out to the parking lot. So when their former boss came back, he walked the red carpet back to his job. They were so glad to see him. But what happened was I gained great credibility with the employees because I admitted I made a mistake, and I brought this fellow back. I made a tough decision. It was the wrong decision. I then admitted it was the wrong decision. In the long run, that helped me with all of the people at that company and what they thought of me and our organization that had taken over the management of the company. But tough decisions, a big part, a leader has to be able to make those tough decisions, unpleasant decisions, but they usually need to be made for the good of the company as a whole. Layoffs, when we would go into companies that were in severe financial problems, we always, a week or two in, had to figure out what are we going to cut back on and who don't we need anymore? And we would then have layoffs. Never easy, never pleasant, but it had to be done for the good of the company. Because if we hadn't laid those people off, there was a good chance the whole company would end up dying and having to be liquidated, and everyone would be out of a job. Oftentimes, it's not that someone has done a bad job, but we just don't need all of these people, and we've got to lay them off. Tough decisions, big part of being a leader.
Peter, thank you very much for being so candid. I mean, this is the sharing even, moments in your life that are not exactly, like a good decision, but then also accepting that, I mean, you can fix it. You can, once you acknowledge that something happened, it shows flexibility, humility, greatness in a word. There's plenty of questions here. Sorry for all the students and participants. I cannot ask all the questions that are here in the chat. I have one last one, and then I want you also to ask a last question for him, opening the microphone. But there's a question here that in different ways is being asked, which is how you transmit in the middle of a crisis like this one, as a leader, how you transmit tranquility, calm, serenity in the middle of the storm.
Good point. A leader, when he faces crisis, must remain calm and in charge. Oftentimes, when a company is in crisis, people are running around. They think the sky is falling. They're saying, oh my goodness, the company, it's running out of money. I'm going to lose my job. What am I going to do? The leader needs to be calm, cool, and collected. Needs to gather the facts, figure the issues. Now, the leader cannot be so calm and not act that he loses the respect of the people. But being calm, cool, and collected, and then, as I said, figuring out what those issues are, and then coming up with the alternatives, the options, using the staff to come up with those options, and then evaluating those options, and then ultimately making the decision. In a crisis, you don't have a lot of time. You never have enough time in a crisis. The other thing you don't have, you never have enough facts. You usually do not have enough facts. And someone could say, well, I don't have enough facts to make a decision. At some point in a crisis, in adversity, you have to say, okay, I'm going to make a decision using what I have right now, because I don't have 6 months to have a consultant come in and gather all of the facts. And so you make that decision.
Wonderful, thank you, Peter. So the question from the participants, I think there's one that raised a hand.
Yes, Daniel has raised his hand.
Okay, go ahead, Daniel. Do you have the camera on so that Peter can see you?
I don't see Danielle.
Hello, Danielle. We don't have the camera and we don't have the microphone either. So
okay.
Maybe someone else is ready for a question.
We have Carla. Carla, do you want to ask a question?
Go ahead, Carla.
Yes, hi Peter. What do you think? What is the most important for you? What is the most important thing that motivate your team? What are the keys to motivate all the time?
Another good question. I think there are several important things. One, remaining calm, cool, and collected in crisis. But two, this ability to communicate, to reach out, to inspire. I happen to be a believer that this ability to speak in front of a group, 5 people or 500 people in a calm and effective way really does more to excite and inspire people. And of course, the body of what you were saying, the solution that you're proposing or your outlining of the crisis. Initially, you might just communicate with them to say, and be very honest, never sugarcoat things. We have a very serious problem. This company is running out of money. And if my CFO and I not get this problem solved by next Thursday, we're going to have to lay everyone in this company off. I had to tell the employees of a company that once, a shirt company that I ran. And so I think having that initial communication, not hiding, you know, it's amazing how some people who are supposed to be leaders hide from problems, hide from issues. Johnson & Johnson, you all have heard of Johnson & Johnson, the big pharmaceutical drug company, bandage company. A number of years ago, not that long ago, I think it was about 6-7 years ago, or maybe it was 8 or 9, the federal government in the United States shut down a number of their plants because they were not being run in accordance with certain laws and sanitary needs and all. The then CEO of the company disappeared from sight. He was not to be seen. And he sent public relations people out to talk to the press, to talk to the government people. I think that was an enormous mistake. And that CEO came under a lot of criticism from the analysts on Wall Street saying, where is the CEO? Why isn't he in the forefront? He's the leader of the organization. He should be communicating. He should be telling us what's going on, telling the employees, customers, clients. So I think communication is a very important thing for the leader an important thing to help inspire people. And also just very direct honesty. Yes, we have a problem. 6 of our plants have been shut down, and then tell the people what the company is doing or what you're doing, what the team is doing. But communication, I think, is a great way to inspire people. And certainly, ultimately, the actions that you take, and if those actions begin to be successful, that inspires people and gets people behind you. Does that help, Carla?
Yes, Peter. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Peter, we have 2 minutes. So we need to get the question from Daniel that I think is there. I don't know if already with the microphone and the computer. If he's there, we can get him, here.
Sure.
But I don't see her yet. We only have 2 minutes. One question.
Okay. 2 minutes.
It's something really tough, right? There's a discussion in the chat around good and bad leadership. And people ask questions like, was Hitler like the Nazi leader, was he a leader? Are there different types of leadership? How these things fit into the leadership discussion?
My comment on that is, I have to say, he was a leader. He inspired, he excited his people, the entire country. He was not a good leader. There can be good and bad leaders. There can be bad leaders who lead large groups of people into bad situations. But I like dealing with good leaders, and we know that's what we're dealing with all of these students. But there can be bad leaders.
So Daniel, is there or not?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you, Daniel.
Daniel.
Hello, Peter.
Hello, Daniel.
So my question is related to what I was speaking about good leaders and bad leaders. Where is the breaking point where you can recognize if what kind of leader are you, or the breaking point in when you start to recognize if you are or not one leader or a manager, because you can be a manager and then across the line to be a leader.
Yes.
So what is the breaking point when you realize that you have to do that jump, or when you realize that you already are there?
In 1 minute, please, Peter.
1 minute? Oh my gosh. Okay, very quickly. A friend of mine who Rafa knows, in her very first job at the Boeing company, she was put in charge of 5 women in a drafting room, I think it was. They were doing some sort of clerical work. And she was the brand new college graduate. They had been there for years, and they were running her around the pole. Initially, she went in thinking like a manager. I just have to tell them what to do, you know, what my boss says, and I'll pass it on. And they were running circles around her, and it just wasn't effective. And the way she puts it is, one day she came into work and she said, "Confound it, I'm not going to let this continue." And she basically went in and slammed the door and had a heart-to-heart, very direct talk with these women. And I think it was very, very direct. And in some ways, she showed leadership. She took care, she grabbed hold of this problem of these employees who just weren't showing her any respect and weren't doing anything. And she said, this ends today. And today, to tell you what's going on, and we're going to do it. She became a better manager, but I think that was the seeds of leadership that were planted in her. They were probably there to begin with, but she realized she needed to take care of this problem. She took charge of it. She addressed it. She began showing some leadership. That woman, who was not an engineer, went on to become vice president of operations of Boeing commercial aircraft later in her career. And she passed that middle point, Danielle, where she could have just gone along and let these people continue running circles around her and been a very unhappy person. Or she could say, "I've reached the line. I am taking charge of this situation and I'm going to solve it." And she ultimately did. I hope that helps, Daniel.
Yeah, it was perfect.
Hope I get to meet you.
Me too.
Okay.
Maybe Cambridge one day.
We hope so.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you all. Peter, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Raphael and the students, this is my pleasure. I have enjoyed this very much, and I just wish we were doing it in Cambridge or doing it down in Columbia.
Yeah, we will do it, I'm sure. One or in both places, in Cambridge, in Boston, and in Columbia.
We need to solve a few problems first in the world.
Yeah. Maybe we can fix them, you know, in our next walk. I mean, for you to know, I mean, Peter and I were both in Boston, and, you know, every week we go
long walks.
2 feet distance between us with a mask, you know, like properly behaving with the confinement rules. And but we discuss about everything, and how to solve the problems of the world. Is one of those. Peter, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Very inspiring and very energizing, as always, discussing with you.
I enjoyed it very much, and great questions and interest.